Hello, everyone. I'm Rae Cannady. I am the project director here at Pretrial Justice Institute, and I'm excited today to have a conversation with Manohar Raju. Did I say that right?
You did. Mano was
Oh
fine
my gosh, I love it.
though.
Okay,
Mhm.
so you are the public defender for San Francisco. Is that the whole county or is that just the city of San Francisco? How does that work? What's your
It's
jurisdiction?
yeah, it is the city and county of San Francisco.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
So, kind of, how many people are we talking? What's the population of those two
Population is
areas?
about close to 900,000.
Okay, so this is a huge office that you are
Yeah,
overseeing.
big
Okay,
office.
all
Yeah.
right.
And then
So,
that population of the city is that much. The office has about 250 or so people in it right
all right, that's huge. I mean, I was
now.
a public defender in Wisconsin. Our largest
Hmm.
office was the Milwaukee office. That's the
Hmm.
largest city that we have in the state of Wisconsin. And
Hmm.
our office had about 60 attorneys and I would say about 30 support staff. So, about half of your office. So, you
Hmm.
guys are moving numbers because I know what
Hmm.
kind of numbers the
Hmm.
Milwaukee trial office was moving in Wisconsin. So, that's a huge responsibility. As we just sort of come off of Juneteenth and we think about liberation and freedom today, some people might think that those concepts are dead, but then we now have a whole new movement now, right? We've seen
Hmm.
protests across the country. I don't know how active folks have been in San Francisco, but I do know that your jails are at max capacity because of an increase in arrests and chargings in your office. So I can only imagine what's going to happen when folks start to push back on some of these federal policies and start getting arrested for exercising their fundamental freedoms for protesting. Um, let's talk a little bit about how folks end up in your jails and what your releases look like in San Francisco, because this is an issue across the country. Folks
Hmm.
get locked up, and more often than not, our Black, Brown, and poor individuals end up staying in custody because of systemic issues and poverty. So the folks who have more resources can get out, regardless of whether they are more dangerous or not.
Hmm.
And our Black, Brown, and poor folks stay in. What does that look like in San Francisco?
Sure. Well, similar in San Francisco. I think it's a nationwide problem. One thing we've done in San Francisco is we started a pretrial release unit. So we try to go in and see as many people as we can before their initial arraignment date to make sure we're putting as much information in front of the judge as we can at that initial arraignment date. So hopefully they can make a decision for release or at least restricted if they are releasing someone with any sort of conditions. Now, we can't see everyone because, like everything in a public defender's office, we started the unit, but we don't have as many people as we'd like in the unit to see as many people as possible. However, internal to that, one thing we started is an end this cycle program. And the idea behind that is that it is common for prosecutors and police to try to seize the entire public safety agenda. But we know as public defenders and public that we as really don't want to see our clients back in the system, and we know that a thriving client keeps all of us safer. So we started an end the cycle program, and just I would say one of the things I try to do as the elected public defender in San Francisco is just innovate. I really believe we've seen mass incarceration for now decades or centuries actually, and we need to start from the public defender perspective. What is a system or a culture or a policy or a unit that we can put in place to try to push in the other direction? Um, because we can talk to our clients, and we're appointed to represent them, we have client attorney confidentiality, right? So our clients can confide in us. We're already fighting to protect their constitutional rights and fighting for their best legal result. So from that position of trust, I think we're also best suited to figure out what does this individual need? Is it a mentor? Is it a connection to labor? Is it short-term housing? Is it substance use disorder counseling? Is it a combination of all of these things? And so that's what the end of the cycle program is about. It's having boots on the ground social workers who are very connected with community, figuring out how do I connect this person? What kind of services can I get them? And if they tell us, listen, I don't feel comfortable in that part of town, I'm comfortable over there, we're like, that's fine. If they tell us I'm still using that, that's fine. That's the kind of thing they'll confide into us that they're not going to tell a sheriff deputy, they're not going to tell a prosecutor, they're not going to tell a cop, they're not going to tell a probation officer, but they'll tell it to us. And that's why I think we are a very undervalued um, entity as far as public safety. So that's what that's about, is trying to get that person moving in the right direction while we're representing them. in their case.
Absolutely. I mean, the public defenders, not only do they have that trust with their client, but with the family and the community as well. We get information that other people can't get
Exactly.
access to.
Yeah.
So when I was working as a public defender, I always thought that my master's degree in social work really helped me in that role, because I always felt like I was kind of 50% social worker and 50% attorney because of all of the collateral needs that my clients had. So for your office to be able to have full-time social workers doing this, I mean, that's amazing. But I can imagine that you probably don't have enough.
No.
So what would your office need to feel like you're fully equipped to be able to run your pretrial unit and the in the cycle program to its fullest capacity and really get the most bang for taxpayers' buck?
Exactly, because right now we have 3 people in that unit,
Oh, wow.
which is not nearly enough. 3 social workers in that unit,
Yeah.
which isn't close to enough. I mean, we could get up to 30, and we still probably wouldn't be able to give people the absolute attention that they need. But to me, that's not a reason not to start a unit like this. And I encourage more public defenders, if they can, to do that. And then we're trying to, see how many people we've seen, and then increasingly trying to get those stories out for people who have been connected to programming in some way and are moving in a more positive direction. But I think that what I can say is that I can have 1 or 2 of these social workers probably generate as much public safety as 10 to 12 police officers. And I think that's where we have to start changing the narrative. For much less expense, much less portion of the city budget, we can generate a lot of public safety from investing in things like end of cycle programs early on when people are getting locked up.
Yeah. Now, when somebody, John or Jane Q Public hears that, they might say, "Well, how is that?" And I think you can confidently say that because while the police serve a purpose in our community, what they do is they stop the person who they think is committing a crime, and they send them to jail. What police don't do is they don't get to the root cause.
Right.
And so what
Right.
you're talking about within the cycle is really getting to the root cause, having a conversation with that individual, and looking at what we know research tells us prevents recidivism, and saying we really can connect you with these resources that would prevent you from engaging in the kinds of behaviors that got you into the system in the first place. So
Exactly.
that's how public defenders really get at the root of public safety, because what we're trying to do is prevent that next crime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's very important that we're warriors in the courtroom, are litigating as much as we can. But another big component of what our public defender's office tries to do is, for whatever reason that person was arrested, and let me be clear, they may be not guilty of everything that was charged, or they might be not guilty of some of what was charged. Maybe the charging was exaggerated by the prosecutor, but independent of that, a vital role is we want to see our clients in a better place. And sometimes it's just really seeing that client and really believing in them, listening to them. A lot of our clients feel they haven't been heard by perhaps the school system or other agencies, but to really just be there and really listening and empowering that client, that has such a huge, I've seen that time and time again. You can have 2 attorneys representing a client have the exact same outcome, but one person who is represented really feels like, I was seeing that was starting, they're moving their life in a more positive direction, and another may not. So, and it's not just attorneys, it's attorneys, social workers, paralegals, investigators, the whole team. But if you really feel seen and feel valued and really feel like someone really cares, I've seen that be a springboard over and over again to people moving their lives in a more positive direction.
Really kind of speaks to this concept of procedural justice, right? Do folks feel like they've been seen, heard, and respected in the system? And I had that same experience as a public defender, somebody who I got a great outcome for, but maybe I didn't have the opportunity to spend as much time with them as I would have liked. They probably didn't have a great review for me. But the individual who I didn't get the outcome I was hoping, but I ended up spending more time with them because of the nature of their case. I'm getting cards from them every year saying, "You were just you were an inspiration, or you helped me out so much." And it really was because they felt like they were seen and heard by me. And I think there's a misnomer in our communities about public defenders for sure. But I think a lot of our conversations with our clients, certainly they're about the case and how they want to focus on that case and how they want to contribute to the defense of that case. But a lot of it is really about their life, right?
Right.
More so, how are they functioning and what is important to them and what are their goals and dreams? And so that kind of segues into, working with your client and what your office's kind of philosophy is on working with the client as a partner in that case. What approach do you guys take?
Sure. Well, I think client empowerment is one of the absolute most vital aspects of our profession as public defenders. And it's something that frankly isn't emphasized that much in law schools or as we're preparing to come into this profession. But there are so many clients who come into the system and very rationally think this is not a fair system. I'm not going to get a fair shake. Let me plead to whatever I can and
and get out.
get out. And the
Yeah.
reality is there are a lot of people in courtrooms across this country every single day pleading to things that they did not do because they don't feel the confidence to not do that. There's often a judge who's presumed someone guilty, a police officer who's presuming someone guilty, a prosecutor who's presuming someone guilty. So it's really important that we come in there and empower that client to say, look, we are going to fight for you. And one of the ways we do that is getting to know them better. So we have a policy in our office where we make sure that attorneys in that initial meeting talk to their clients about something other than what's in the police report. Find out who they are as a person. What kind of music do they listen to? Tell me about your favorite auntie, or tell me about your godson that you're taking care of, or just get to know what area they grew up in. So, something about them that so you can connect and start to get to know that person better. Because when you're in court, you don't have as much time to have that conversation. You have to be quicker, but it's not because you don't care. It's because in court you don't have a lot of time right now. But it's really important that we start to develop that the repository in ourselves about knowing that client. And when it gets to the more serious case, even going and visiting with family members and really spending time with them, because then you're a much better advocate for that client. But it's really important that we, there's trial tax we have to deal with, which is judges giving someone more than a pretrial offer and threatening them. There's overcharging that we have to deal with, which is prosecutors looking at whatever they can in the penal code to stack up the years and the charges. And then there's pretrial detention, which is all these decisions are made while you're in jail. So looking at all that, a lot of clients will say, well, let me plead to something that can get me out either now or soon to avoid all of that. And, if you really work on your trial game, but become a better advocate in court, become better at doing investigation, become better at retaining extras, becoming a better advocate, then you, and convincing your client, listen, no, I can beat a lot of these charges. I know I can reveal truth, demand justice in court, and get you a better result. There are going to be more and more clients who feel, oh, okay, I'm not going to take that bad deal. I'm going to let you fight for me. I'm going to let you do your job. So, and that's just a very, very vital part of what we do. And so we insist that anyone in custody is seen by their attorney within 48 hours of the initial arraignment. We encourage our attorneys to reach out to a family member within the first 10 days so that they have a better understanding of who that client is. And just constantly, when you're in court, go explain to that client who they are, introduce them to your investigator, introduce them to your paralegal, show them all the work that you're doing so that you can hopefully avoid that coercive plea that may seem okay in the short term, but is going to really impact that client potentially for the next couple of years, decades, and maybe even the next generation.
Yeah, because of the numerous collateral consequences to a conviction, even a misdemeanor.
Right.
Yeah, so in the various trainings that I had as a public defender, there was a defense attorney named Cynthia Roseberry, and she would call it rocking with her clients. And I just love that term. I kind of think about sitting on a porch somewhere in the South and just having a conversation. And what you end up doing is you end up getting a ton of information that actually ends up helping you with the case, even though you're not directly discussing the case, right?
Exactly.
So for any skeptics out there, it really does help you be a better lawyer, and you end up learning ways to sort of approach your case by getting these little tidbits, and your client doesn't always know what you need, so you kind of just have to explore. But some of my clients have been the most brilliant, intelligent, just with it individuals that I've ever met. Best co-counsel, I've ever had. You got to use them. They're a resource. And nobody is more invested in the outcome of that case than they are. So empowering your client to share with you, to trust you, and to be a partner in that case is so important. I'm so happy to hear that that's really the approach you guys take in your office.
And I just love that vision of actually rocking with your client. I'm envisioning that on a porch, rocking back and forth, because the reality is a jury can tell how much you care about that person you're representing. They can feel it. And I've had jurors tell me, and I've seen some of my colleagues who practice at a high level tell the jurors will tell you, I can tell you really cared about this. You weren't just mailing it in. You weren't doing this because you're This is your job. You were doing this because you really believed in it. And that impacts people. I mean, the way it's not just what we say, it's how we say it.
It's how we say it. That's right.
And
Yeah,
sometimes though you're going to say it in a way because you've developed that just the number of amount of time you spent with that client and just getting to know them. And sometimes you don't, you're just rocking with them. You're
that's
talking with
right.
them. You're asking them, you give me some parenting advice. This is tough. Like I know
That's
I've gotten some great parenting advice from some of my clients and some tips and techniques from them, but just getting to know who they are as people and rocking with them to your saying, I that does have that impact when you are then in court, and they don't train you in law school. Like
They don't. They
you're working
don't.
on,
You're
yeah.
right. I mean, one of the things that they talk with you about in law school is interviewing your clients, but what they don't talk about is getting to know your client, right? And really caring about what they care and taking
Right.
on that fight as your own. And I agree with you. I think juries can smell your authenticity before you even stand up from the counsel table.
Absolutely.
So you talk
Absolutely.
a lot about all these pressures that come to bear on the person in charge, one of which is pretrial incarceration. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about what are the factors that the judge looks at in deciding whether a person should be released from custody when they've been arrested and they're in custody?
Well, they're looking at a lot of factors in here. The main one that they should be looking at is, are they coming back to school, right?
Right.
And that's really should be the main factor that a judge is looking at. But as we know, there are all these biases that come in, and it's sometimes difficult to get them to lock in on just that factor. And that leads to, unfortunately, a lot of wrongful convictions because people are then going to plead to get out 9 days later when we have a preliminary hearing. So that's why it's super important that we do as much as possible to get that client released to avoid that. But if we can't accomplish that, then we have to try to empower that client to make sure that, sometimes they have to stay in longer to enable us to get a more just result.
Yeah. And you can convince your client to do that in many ways. If they trust what you're saying, they're willing to stick it out, right?
Right, right.
But you're right. If they think that they can get out by pleading, that's what they're going to do.
Hmm.
And jurisdictions across the country have different criteria, but what the
Hmm.
judge, pretty much in every jurisdiction, the judge should only be looking at whether they're going to come back to court and whether they're going
Hmm.
to stay out of trouble, right?
Right.
So when you talk about coming back to court, is there any distinction in San Francisco between somebody who has missed court because, let's say, they didn't have transportation or childcare, or
Hmm.
somebody who missed court because they hit it, they left, they went to New Jersey and said, I'm not coming back?
Right. Well, what we try to do is to get a court to, and I know we're going to have a conversation later on about bench warrants. We try to get the court to hold the bench warrant. If we can tell them this is why they couldn't make it at this court date, and this is the reason, we go in there and try to emphasize that. And also the huge cost of enforcing the bench warrant, going out, doing the arrest, having that person come in, it's a big cost to city and county budgets everywhere. So we will try to get that bench warrant held whenever we can. And that's why it's super important that we have that contact, not just with the client, but hopefully with a family member or someone, a loved one of theirs, so we can stay in touch with that client and try and make
Yeah.
sure that we don't have unnecessary bench warrants being issued.
Yeah.
And
Well, most jurisdictions.
I know you at the Pretrial Justice Institute. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the Willful Flight
Yeah, because
project? I think
most
they're connected.
jurisdictions
Yeah.
don't make a distinction between somebody who misses court because of sort of everyday things and someone who misses court because they intended to. They're like, I'm
Hmm.
not coming back, right?
Hmm.
The only state right now that has made that distinction is Illinois. They
Hmm.
did that legislatively, although
Hmm.
there was some lawsuits, so they didn't actually implement it until 2023. And we've got some good data coming out of that. What PJI wanted to do right around that same time, just as Illinois was implementing, was to partner with a jurisdiction to implement that, to have a court distinguish between, did somebody miss court because they intended to miss court? They had said, I'm not surrendering to the jurisdiction of this court, or life events, which we know
Hmm.
disproportionately tend to impact people of color and poor folks, right?
Hmm. Right.
Because we do very little to take into consideration people's life and their calendars and their circumstances when we set court dates.
Hmm.
Um, and what we also were hoping to do is to really get at the inequities, because we know that we have various innovations that we can put into place to sort of decrease our overall jail population. But when we look at cities and jurisdictions that have implemented those innovations, we still have Black, brown, and poor folks who end up staying in jail.
Hmm.
And so what we did is we had submitted a grant to the federal grant proposal to the federal government. We called it the Willful Flight Project, hoping to change the bail criteria from, well, let's look retrospectively and say, well, have they ever missed court? And that's what we're going to judge them on, to
Hmm.
looking forward and creating criteria to try and decide who are really the folks that we think are going to intentionally abscond.
Hmm.
Those are the individuals for whom we should actually expend resources to go out, find, arrest, and bring back, and say,
Hmm.
no, we actually have to, finish this case out, as opposed to the individuals who may have missed for other reasons. In fact, in some jurisdictions, you will have a miss because you were in another county in jail, you
Hmm.
were in the hospital. There
Hmm.
really is very little distinction about why a person misses
Hmm.
when they weren't intending to abscond, and those two terms get mixed together. And you have a
Hmm.
lot of jurisdictions that will treat an unintentional miss as though it's an intentional, and then that will boost their risk in the court's eyes, which will then boost whatever bond amount they're thinking of setting, which then keeps people behind bars
Hmm.
really unnecessarily.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, the federal funding was cut, and so the court that we were working with that was very excited to do that wasn't able to do that. But we think that's an area that
Hmm.
jurisdictions should really, really try to, at least in your bail arguments, right? This is one of the
Hmm.
things that I think public defenders really take on,
Hmm.
is we know language matters,
Hmm.
and it's in a lot of jurisdictions around the country where public defenders start the language change.
Hmm.
And so in your bail arguments, you could even start by ensuring that you separate out a non-appearance from an intentional, willful miss or willful
Right.
flight.
Right.
Um, and it takes a while, but
Yeah.
what I have found is eventually
Hmm.
people start to adopt that language, and
Right.
then they
Hmm.
start to separate that out in their brain. And when I
Hmm.
think when we start to do that,
Hmm.
our clients will get the benefit of the doubt, because we also have new research showing that it's actually not the person charged that clogs up the system caseload from missing. It's actually other folks in the system who've been subpoenaed and don't show up,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
witnesses, like police
Right.
officers. And when
Hmm.
they're subpoenaed, it's for a substantive issue. When they
Hmm.
don't show up, that actually does clog the system. A
Right.
lot of times when our clients don't show up, it's a scheduling thing,
Right.
right? We actually make people come to court more frequently than they really need to in the first place.
Hmm.
And when they miss, a lot of times nothing of consequence is going to occur at that hearing, anyways.
Hmm.
But when we've
Right.
subpoenaed somebody, we expect some testimony to take place. That's an
Right.
important hearing. They
Right.
often don't come, and there often is no consequences to them. The
Hmm.
only person who gets consequences when they miss a court date is the person accused. So that's
Right.
one of those important projects that we're still hoping that we'll be able to implement. And we really want to sort of call to action to all of our public defenders to say, there's nothing wrong with separating out that language. And when you have a client who doesn't show up, saying, because we do it already, right? We just don't
Right.
necessarily name it. We're on the record
Hmm.
saying, Judge, I just spoke to John yesterday. I know
Hmm.
he was coming. He told me his plan. We were
Hmm.
supposed to meet at this time beforehand. But just being specific about that language, I think, is important.
Right.
I think
So
what
that
else is
they,
important is really talking about prevention. So how do
yeah.
we prevent this stuff in the first place, right? Because your office is trying to do that more on sort of, I wouldn't even say the back end, but maybe the middle end, right? They've already been accused of a crime and arrested, but you're trying to look at, hey, how can we improve your circumstances so that that doesn't happen again?
Hmm.
But what else is your office doing to really address the prevention aspect?
Sure. Well, we have these programs called the Magic. Now it's been consolidated into one Magic program, mobilizing adolescent growth in community Magic. So we have the Bayview and the Fillmore, two historically Black parts of San Francisco. And as we know, the history of racism and white supremacy in this country, a lot of Black and brown people end up getting caught up in this system. in these areas, we've started these youth empowerment programs where we have convener meetings once a month. So the different community-based organizations get to know what each other are doing. And throughout the year, there's also a lot of programming. We just had our kickoff a couple of days ago, actually, and free programming in neighborhoods that have a lot of system impacted people. Some of the people participating have family members in this system. But this is really designed to keep people engaged in academics, in arts, in sports throughout the summer, preventing summer slide and, in academically, but also just keeping young people engaged and connected, doing positive things. And it's a hugely successful program. Our magic program, it's only 5 employees doing all of this, but they do
Goodness.
amazing work, really good at connecting with youth. And that's a skill, to be really able to connect with youth and be a youth empowerment professional is a skill. And the people we have, I'm super proud of the program. We give out backpacks also before school starts, thousands of backpacks, both in the Fillmore and the Bayview every year in August. And our high school graduation rate for people who've had significant engagement in the program is 100%. So
That's
this is the kind
amazing.
of work that I think more public defenders office should start doing, because we talk about the school to prison pipeline, and we're talking about, no, we're trying to break that. We want the school to more school pipeline, or the school to job pipeline. And I think public defenders are particularly well suited to make those connections. And whenever I'm going out to an event, people may have a relative or someone who's in the system, they'll talk to me about it, and I can ease their concerns about it or give them some information or connect them to the legal team. But also just that youth empowerment, community empowerment work is so vital to reversing, decades of mass incarceration in this country.
Yeah, decades of under-resourcing those
Mhm.
communities, right?
Exactly,
I
exactly.
I love talking to you, Mano. And so I would love for us to have a part two to talk a little bit more about how your office is pulling the community in to help in some really, really new and innovative ways. But before we close, I think most people have a misconception about how public defender offices are funded.
Hmm.
And I think there is an assumption that across the board, whatever the DA's office gets, the public defender's office gets, right? And in some areas that may be true, but in most areas that is not true. So, how can people, whether it be the average public, whether it be foundations, whether it be whomever, how can they help the San Francisco Public Defender's Office carry out these programs that are really, sort of breaking generational curses and helping to prevent future crime?
Sure. You're right. We are not equally resourced. We're only 60% of the prosecutor's budget in San Francisco. And in addition to the work we do in the criminal courts, we also do defend immigrants, and we have federal authorities on the other side of the aisle. We have a mental health unit. We have the city attorney on the other side of the aisle. Of course, they also have the police department and the prosecutor's office, which is 14 times our budget. Our investigators are investigating cases against the police. So, it's really not even close to fair. There's nothing close to parity. And we're currently in the budget cycle right now. So, you know, we, the mayor, any supervisor in San Francisco that you're aware of, to let them know, listen, we have one of the most dynamic public defender's offices in the country, but we need the resources. And there's been a 30% increase in filings by the prosecutor's office in San Francisco, and we didn't get any new positions thus far this year. They haven't committed to any new positions for us, which means functionally that's a 30% cut, because if we giving us 30% more work without the appropriate resources, that amounts to a cut. So not just in San Francisco, but throughout the country, I think it's really important that we talk to supervisors, talk to city council members, talk to mayors about the vital work that public defenders offices do, and try to get them to devote more of the resources from this whole what they call public safety apparatus, devote those to public defender offices.
Yeah, because the public defender's office is just as vital a part of public safety as any other part that you would think of. The police, prosecutor's office, you name it, you guys are just as important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And we'll put maybe when we finish this, I can provide all of our handles on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and you can see some of the work we're doing around budget
Oh,
advocacy.
absolutely. We'll make sure that we include links because your website is great. So we'll
Okay.
include the links and ways that people can get more information. Absolutely.